Welcome to MAGICademy podcast. Today with us is Caitlin, the founder of MindWise, a consultancy firm that specializes in bringing wellness into the digital space. She teaches digital wellness in Stanford University, also conduct consultations across organizations like Meta, Google, US departments such as US Army, and helping people to bring in wellness, empathy into the leadership. In today's episode, we talk about the space of digital wellness, what that means, and we also explore the 5 pillars of all, what empathy means in the leadership context, how we can potentially experience the flow state, and much, much more to explore. Let's wait no further and let's welcome Caitlin. Beep, beep, beep,
Beautiful.
beep. aliens walking out of the spaceship. How would you introduce yourself to an alien?
I love this as the first question, especially because I'm very curious and I've moved around a lot growing up. So first off, I would probably have an AI tool to be my translator so that I can speak the language that would be natural to the alien. And then I'd introduce myself and just say, hi, I'm Caitlin, and a lot of what I do is connected to the word connection itself. So I empower meaningful human connection. Now in the future, maybe it would be alien connection, but I would be talking with them about, okay, what makes our life better? What actually now in this day and age, a lot of people used to measure quality of life by, let's say, optimizing productivity. And now we can use a lot of technology and we can use AI tools to help us be more productive. But lately, a lot of people have said, well, what's the meaning? Is my life actually enjoyable? Is it meaningful? So a lot of what I do is working with applied well-being to really go for those quality experiences, and I help guide them. So then I'd probably ask the alien, hey, you want to try something out that I'm involved in facilitating? And then we'd go from there, because I think introductions are a conversation. Yeah.
So it's a connection, and the connection
Yeah.
fosters the conversation. Nice.
Yeah. And you want to meet them where they're at. Like maybe they're interested in the fact that I teach at Stanford, which I do, but I wouldn't lead with that, because I'd want to know, are they interested in education? What's your background? The way I introduce myself is usually customized to the audience that I'm reaching.
Excellent. So MindWise, when did you come up with this name? What does that mean? We're curious.
Yeah. So MindWise is my company. I worked for over a decade as an educator. So if we back up, just out of university, I was a programmer. So I was doing computer programming. And then I was really interested in what is the way that the human brain learns? Like, how do we learn best? Usually it involves a state of curiosity. And I ended up working in education, teaching at overseas schools. So so I was born in Boston. I'm originally from the US, but I've moved around a lot over the course of my life. And I was living in Brussels for 2 years, and then Zurich for 7 years. And I had this idea that I wanted to found a company that would be about integrated learning across the lifespan, and really focused on how people connect and how people form great ideas, and what could be like an incubation hub for great ideas taking off. So I founded MindWise back in 2015, and it was after teaching, and really figuring out that our whole life people really want to connect, they want to tell great stories, and I knew I could help facilitate that by having my own company and being like a strategic consultant. So so MindWise has the anchors of mindfulness and design and storytelling, and it really is like an engine for people being able to harness those great ideas and also connect better in the groups that they serve.
Nice. And then you mentioned there's at the core there's a triangle of digital wellness. Can you tell us more about that?
Sure. Well, my business started to grow, and I kept coming back and doing more education work. And this phase that we're in right now, I think a lot of people were coming to me and saying, "Okay, well, you teach about things like mindfulness and design and storytelling." And through it all, I'm a technologist, and I still do. I design worlds in virtual reality. And the three core tenets that I lead experiences with are: how do we embody digital well-being so that we're building relationships that are human mediated by technology? So we use technology in a really mindful way, focused on our well-being. So that's one of the anchors in the triangle. And then the second one is collaboration, because I found that the more that people focused on well-being, they felt, okay, I'm now resilient, I'm sustained, but I'm part of a system. So people could connect inside and feel like they had more capacity. And then part of this triangle of experiences is, well, then how do we connect better in groups? How in teams do we each understand each other's roles? In a distributed team, how do we stay connected and also understand how to reach each other? So that's the second part of what I foster and teach. And then the third part of the triangle then becomes imagination, which I love teaching because it's all how I grew up, like curiosity driven. How do we use our senses in really engaging ways? How do we really form great ideas and involve our human creativity? And that's where I infuse a lot of AI in the system, and really guide people, saying, hey, human imagination is meant to be collaborative. It's meant to involve well-being. And I know we're going to get into more topics about this, so I might just pause there.
Yeah. Let's pause there and leave our audience wonder for a bit.
Yeah. Sense
And
of wonder.
some sense of wonder. Yes. Um, some people may be curious, like, okay, so you're talking about wonder. What exactly is wonder? And you mentioned there's like 5 aspects of wonder. Can you kind of guide us deeper into the concept?
Yeah. And for the audience, sometimes when Gianni asks me a question, I tend to go deeper layers. Like, okay, we just brought up the word wonder. A lot of people love the word, and they might think, oh, like a childlike state, or oh, wonder, like, oh, wonder and imagination. And there were several paths that led me to really focus on the word wonder. I went back for an MFA, for my Master of Fine Arts in poetry, and so I focused on poetry. And part of my poetry theme was really focused on the idea of imagination and states of play, and how we come up with great ideas without force. And it ends up being this amazing kind of state where the body goes into an open state of wonder. So wonder ended up being some of the themes of what I would write about. And from there, I wrote 2 books of nonfiction. And the first one was about mindfulness and design, called Mindful by Design. And the follow-up to that book is called Designing Wonder. And so I really looked into, well, in all of my experiences as an educator, as an innovator, as a technologist, it seemed like the people who had the greatest insights and these epiphanies, they'd have these moments when they were less attached. They weren't trying to prove something. They were trying to discover something, which is kind of a different body frame. And so in my investigation, part of the nonfiction research was saying, well, throughout history, even before advanced technology, what does the word wonder actually entail? Like, is it just a childlike state of wondering why the sky is blue? That's one facet of wonder, and that's kind of the what if, like, oh, I wonder why, or I wonder why this scientific principle works that way. And then you start to kind of investigate, So that's one level of wonder, like the curiosity wonder. And then I found a second facet of wonder was wondering about another person. So it's sort of like a wonder empathy. Like, I wonder what Gianni's experience is like. And that means that I understand that my perception is framed in what I consider my vessel, like my human body is framing,
Mhm.
and my experience and my life and my culture, it kind of frames my view. And if I really want to embrace empathy, I have to wonder outside of myself and realize that I'm in a system and I'm just one set of um, experiences and perspectives and characteristics. So that second facet of wonder seemed to be people wondering about other relationships and other viewpoints. And the third facet is actually the one that I gravitate toward when I'm doing VR design, and it's called surfing wonder, where
Mhm.
you get into a state of flow, which we might talk about, where you kind of are surfing on the wave of your thoughts and you don't analyze. It's just people were talking about these states of wonder where they just kind of ride that wave and they can narrate their own thoughts in a stream of consciousness. They're sort of aware of what they're doing, but they surrender to the moment. A lot of people have these great wonder experiences like that right before they fall asleep or right when they wake up, because our
Mhm.
inhibition is lower and we're having all of these influences that are natural. So we call that hypnagogia. Um, so that's that state of wonder that I call surfing wonder. The fourth state is the overview effect. So it's a state of wonder where astronauts have recorded that they go into outer space, and time again they look down on planet Earth and they see it from a distance and they start to feel this amazing sense of awe and this sense of wonder outside ourselves, where you start to get goosebumps and you're bigger than yourself, you're also smaller, and people talk about that level of wonder being a feeling of connection with the whole. It sounds spiritual, but like the whole universe. They start to feel like, oh, these countries that humans have provided borders for, they really don't have borders when we look at them from on high. And people start to feel more of a stewardship for the earth, a wish to work together. Again, it's kind of less friction and more wonder, more feeling of awe, and oh my gosh. So that's the fourth facet. And then the last facet is, and these kind of they're kind of scaling up to like a grand feeling. And the last feeling is something really hard to articulate, but I call it the wonder of the gestalt, because it means that the sum is greater than the parts. You just kind of feel like everything fits together, and you when you're in that state of wonder, you don't even have to think anything cognitively. It's just everything seems familiar, as if you've already been there before, and a sense of belonging, a sense of almost like safety. And people say, "Oh, this level of wonder of the Gestalt." It's like, yeah, of course, we're here, we've arrived, and people just kind of dwell in an appreciation for the now moment. So yeah, I guess I describe them all in detail with you, Gianni, and with the listeners, because wonder kind of fires in the brain on the opposite side of the spectrum to anger. And so, a lot of our social media and the way that we operate in the world, we don't think about it, but it's very competitive. We're kind of fueled by maybe anger as an emotion. It's used in certain ways. And the more that people have access to tools for wonder, they can kind of counteract that impulse and learn more. I think everyone has that wonder muscle, and they can learn how to flex it and how to use it as a superpower, and how to stay really agile in a world that is challenging.
That makes me curious. I know we're gonna talking about like flow.
Mm-hmm.
As we talk about the flow, and you talk about like the tools to help us feel the wonder. So maybe when we talk about the flow, we also can talk about what kind of techniques, tools, or ways that we can enhance or maybe activate the sense of wonder, and let it grow across the five domains, five levels that you mentioned. So let's
Yeah.
first talk about flow. What do you think is flow?
So personally, I think of flow and I immediately think about the science because, of course, we're talking about topics that can be seen as kind of fluffy or, a soft skill. Um, but my work with the brain and with neuroscience, there's a lot of scientific data backing up what we talk about. So I think about this researcher named Mihai Csikszentmihalyi, and we can put these research notes in part of the notes for the podcast so that listeners can learn about Csikszentmihalyi. He researched flow states starting about 3 or 4 decades ago, and then went on to publish a lot of research about, well, what is the word flow, and how does it affect our creativity, our psychology. So when I think about flow, I actually think about a state that a human is in, and I think about kind of like a flow cycle. So when people like athletes or people who are performing, they say, "Oh, I'm in a state of flow." I've been there. It's kind of like surfing wonder in a certain way. You're riding the wave. I've been there as a writer when I'm writing and I just get in that zone.
Me too.
Yeah, you too. It's a great feeling, right? You
Yeah.
almost feel like you're channeling something that comes from outside yourself.
Yeah, you're like downloading
Yeah,
from the bigger universe.
you're downloading. It's not self-conscious at all. So I think about flow almost like complete natural in the zone. Yeah, and such a pure state that we couldn't always be in flow. That would be kind of like, okay, we might just burn out if we were always in a flow state. But we want to facilitate that being part of our process. So I think about attributes to what that means to have a flow state. And there tend to be certain indicators, like people who experience flow tend to say, well, I'm less attached to narration. Like it's not me, Caitlin, because then I'd be outside of myself narrating. You're just in the experience. You tend to not have a sense of time. Like people lose sense of tracking time and space. They don't have a fixed identity or an agenda, and they feel as if they're so intrinsically motivated that they're just in that task. So what they're doing, in a challenge skills balance, usually if you're in a flow state, there's a little bit of challenge and you're able to meet it. So it's kind of like you have a really awesome dance partner where someone's like, you feel that, and it's yeah, it's a beautiful state because you can have all of this creative output and you can feel really connected to what you're doing. Yeah, so maybe one of my definitions would be like you're playing your instrument the way it's meant to be played, like a violinist on stage. Whatever you're doing, you're just so in it, and there's an intrinsic joy. Like flow is a beautiful, beautiful thing. Yeah,
something like the stewardship that kind of kind of just let it be, and you're helping it. Yeah. When it comes to like design, so a lot of our audiences are learning development leaders, program managers, or designers, practitioners. How do we build an experience that gets people in the flow? Is there a particular strategy?
This is a great question. Yeah. I don't want to cut you off if there's more. It's just, that's a good question. Because let's say I'm facilitating something. I love it when people are not aware. There's a quote that says, good design, something like good design is wonderful and great design is invisible. So if I'm doing this really well and inviting people into flow state, they might not even know that there's all this, and I mean, they trust me. That's the key. They have to have a relational trust with me. I have layers of intention, and I'm leading them so naturally in an experience and an exercise that they're not self-conscious, because I'm not saying like mechanically, okay, now we're entering flow state, now you are aware. Because what's usually happening in my design process is I'm letting people, for example, if I'm doing a flow exercise and it's in virtual reality, it's a great example because it's a perfect world for losing yourself, losing track of time. What avatar do you want to be? Who do you want to play? And people have to feel safe because they're crossing a threshold into something that's unknown. So there's kind of that excitement, but also maybe insecurity. And to enter flow state, I'm really focused on, well, let's make the duration something that's not so long that it becomes taxing on the system. So it has to be, in my mind, like about 20 to 40 minutes, a good sweet spot for somebody to have a great experience and then feel nourished and come back across the threshold, like back to their quote unquote normal world. And along the way, there's a lot of body check-in, like a lot of somatic checks, like, okay, how's your posture? How are you breathing? And inviting people to get really curious, like, oh, let's actually, feel our feet. Let's feel this exercise that so many people think is a neck up experience. Like, I'm putting on a headset, but they're in the experience feeling like, oh, my arms feel different. My body feels different. And they start to enter a flow state because they realize that a lot of the things that they were carrying, they can just like let go of, whether it's stress from the day or a story that we told ourselves that doesn't serve us, or something that's been holding them back. So a lot of that kind of priming leads somebody, I think, to what happens in a flow state that's not prescriptive at all. I give people kind of like a safety to feel freedom.
So I think the safetyness is kind of the most important as you enter into the virtual environment.
Yeah.
And then get them some tasks that's not too easy or not too difficult, so they fall into that flow zone and guide them through the process.
Yeah. And enough freedom that they can explore a little bit and get
Enough
curious.
freedom,
And then
agency.
Agency. When I was teaching, people would ask, well, how do you design a classroom? And I'd say, well, there are some anchors. Like, I always believe in having some tenets, and belief I have is that if you can infuse dignity, freedom, invention, and agency into any kind of world, then people are going to thrive. Because it's like, I often ask myself when I'm starting meditation, like, oh, how do I hold my body in a state of dignity? Because, so often we're taught to align with our purpose, but purpose can sometimes make us feel like a utility. I'm like, well, I'm not going to do anything before I start with dignity for me, and also dignity for you, like the other people in a space. I'll say, well, we all have a natural, it's like we have a human, I believe in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, like really strongly, and we all have dignity. We should have data dignity. We should have sovereignty. And so in immersive worlds, sometimes people ask me, well, how do you keep people from being bad actors in social spaces? And like things like that will happen. But a lot of what I do is a collective norms, like how do we want to be in the space? I give people a lot of choice and agency to co-design. And you find that usually if you have this level where you're inviting that, and then people rise to that level because they're like, oh, this space respects me, and I get to help not just receive it, but I get to help create it.
Safety, desirable difficulty, agency, and space for growth.
Yeah, and space for growth. Yeah.
Nice. Yeah.
You're a designer. You get this already. Yeah, totally. It makes sense.
Excellent. Now that let's do some like a case study, right? So you
Mhm.
were invited to do a virtual reality training for the military folks to help them facilitate and grow deep empathy and um, compassion
Yeah.
and resilience. And I've seen your work. You bring people into the deep sea of the ocean, and where they dive, they see different fish, animals, and you bring them all the way to the moon, and there's little big whales swimming on the surface of the moon.
Yeah. In
So there's a
virtual
lot of
reality.
in
Yeah.
virtual reality. Yes, it would be great if it's in real
I know.
reality,
I know. It's like
right?
I try to make it very believable if our brain believes it to be true, but yes.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And so tell us a little bit more about this project that you just worked on, and what was that like, and how did you design the program? What kind of business goals or metrics that you use or not use?
Sure. I love designing trainings and doing more long term, not just one and done, but I've been working with different private groups, enterprises, different private companies, and also with some of the military and the US State Department. So having groups like this to work with, it's really wonderful because they tend to already be aspirational. Like they want to go into new spaces, and sometimes they want to um, stretch and grow, and they need somebody like me who has that area of expertise where I can be the guide and invite them to do, like, they wouldn't maybe normally do these things in groups, and then they hire me as a facilitator. And what I personally love is that I'm not digital or physical. I actually do trainings that are a combination and blend. So some people use the word phygital, like we can go physical and digital and cross those
Mm.
spaces without it being exclusive. So with a case study like the Air Force that I was just working with, I came in person to the base where they have leadership training. We met together. I wanted to learn from them too. And they have a lot of different facets to their leadership training where they have people on site on the base who have almost like a rotation where they come back for retraining and then they go back to their field work and their work leading officers. So these were all people in a high degree of leadership position, and they wanted to have training that had the resilience and the wellness baked in to the technology training. And that, I think, is such, I love it when groups already have that investment in the strategy, because if you can train to have something like resilience and well-being and you apply it to, say, a virtual reality training, you're kind of training your mind to be really curious, and to approach technology, which can be intimidating in this day and age. If you can meet capacity and meet well-being, then you're naturally kind of training yourself to get curious and to work in groups and to have a different mindset about authority. Like in a system that used to
Mm.
be very top-down leadership and still is, if you can train military officers to be more collaborative and a little bit less always needing to have all the answers, it's really, really healthy. Because right now there's a lot of stress. This is across all industries. There's a lot of stress, a lot of burnout. Um, and what I do is less of a band-aid. I'm not saying, oh, there's a problem, let's treat the problem and let's be really serious about it. I'm actually incorporating a lot of play, a lot of collaboration, a lot of bounce, because I'm telling people there's gravity of the situation. I acknowledge the pain and the suffering, and that the world we live in is very serious. Um, and also our minds, we really want to have surprise and delight. We really want to have a full color spectrum, and we exist as 3D creatures, and we really want to learn how to build 3D systems and, go into everything from a flight simulation to a world that people can co-create in VR. And you in ways, our seriousness and the attachment that we have to sometimes perfection gets in the way of that liberation that ultimately makes the wellness happen. So yeah, I'm giving a long answer, but I guess what I want to highlight is they were a great case study because I came in, did in-person training, in-person workshops. We learned about collaboration design and resilience and storytelling. And then with that same group, they had headsets, and I had a second, like part 2, where we all went into VR and we sculpted together and we did these different play simulations, and we went into immersive worlds and had wonder sessions and landscape experiences with meditation. And I mean, I love facilitating things like this because it was really, really rewarding to see them over the course of several weeks have that accelerated growth and technology understanding, and also have the collaboration and the teamwork that ended up coming about.
And sometimes it's like the technology is growing always faster than how we grow psychologically.
Yeah.
So sometimes that creates stress and discrepancy. But it's very great to see that the folks there are very curious about the mindfulness of this kind of journey. And once we have that psychologically caught up with the technology, I believe that that's where the technology optimism can really shine, is we have the power, the psychological power to command the technology toward a better direction.
Yeah.
Otherwise we may fall victim
And then I
to
think in this world that's so AI saturated, then we also address that question of, well, what is the future that we want to build, and how can we partner with AI in a really mindful way? If we're connected and we have our goals in mind, then it becomes more of a globalized cooperative model, I think.
Yeah. So since we're talking about AI, so coming from the technology optimistic perspective, how do you see AI being incorporated into designing learning experiences or programs that activate different levels of awe from your perspective?
I'm loving all these questions, by the way. I love it. I love it because, again, kind of a fun factoid back to your first question. There's a writer that I really love. His name is Yuval Noah Harari. He wrote the book Sapiens. He also wrote Homo Deus. And recently on podcasts, he's been saying that AI should be called alien intelligence, not artificial. And he was saying alien, not just, somebody from a different planet, but this idea that it's an intelligence that's outside of ourselves. So he says it's alien intelligence, and when we use it, we can use it. We just need to label it. Like we need to know that it's not masquerading as a human, so that when I interact with AI, I understand I'm interacting with it. It's not substituting. It can play a role, but I feel strongly about that partnership where I have to treat it like a different kind of intelligence, and it's going to help me automate. And maybe it's going to, for a script, give me great ideas, and I'm the designer, and I get to storyboard using AI to save me time. I really love it, and I'm somebody who's, I'm mindful. I guess the word would be I have consideration. I'm conscious. I'm not just saying, oh, AI is all the answer to everything. But I feel like it's an exciting time to embrace the fact that it's making certain jobs easier, and also to deeply kind of tune in to the noise, because it can make everything feel a little bit heavy and noisy right now. So people feel like they're always one step behind, or maybe there's some question of something happening in the future that's not human agency. So I think it's a time not to be afraid. Yeah, you feel that too?
Yeah. I feel like I'm always playing catch up.
Yeah.
Because the technology is always moving many steps faster than I can comprehend.
Yeah. And then you have, this kind of, it could be like a doom topic where people then have a sense of dread and they feel like they can't catch up. So in my in my ideal situation, we would really be conscious. We'd keep having these talks about diligence and talks about AI safety, and have it be something that we really are deliberate about as a culture. And we also use it to facilitate better understanding, whether it's having AI translation tools. I'm also someone who believes in sovereignty. So I do think that people's data needs to be their own, and when people have questions about AI, I think that's definitely fair to think about, should AI be substituting for human actors? I think, anytime it's masquerading, I think it just needs to be labeled like this is AI, so that then the consumer understands, like the people get to understand, okay, how am I dancing with this as a tool? Or ultimately it needs to, it's necessitated a lot of places to change their standards, like more portfolios, more a different way to go about grading, a different way to go about communication. But I don't think the quality measure should go down. That's why sometimes when I write, or when I'm writing poetry, I'll write about, like this book of poems that came out this spring was all about communicating in this age of AI, and really recognizing that we as humans are nature. We're a biological nature, and we're having this kind of duality right now that could be beautiful if we allow it.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Great. And now let's take a pivot and let's explore deeper into your stories. What did Caitlin enjoy doing when she was like 11, 12 years old?
Caitlin enjoyed playing in the woods, making up stories, and building forts. I like third person, so I'll just keep going with this. She would do her homework on the bus so that she could leave and go outside as much as possible. Yeah, and she was always reading and writing. And in this, we moved around a lot when I was little, so I used to take books sometimes and save wherever I was. I'd bring them into nature and save the last page, because I knew when I read a book that I loved, and they tended to be books with maps at the beginning, because if it had a map, it was an exciting book in my world. But I'd often want to read the last page and have nobody around me except for the trees, because I just wanted to read the last page and then have some time to just think about it. So I was definitely what you might call a daydreamer. My grandfather, he was amazing. He had been in the military as a weatherman, and he also was a mathematician, and he ended up doing work with NASA where he was designing the spacesuits. So he worked with ultrasonic technology, and he was always telling me about his experiments and doing things with ultrasonic bonding. So which is keeping the spacesuit impenetrable to the outer atmosphere. So you had to do the seams in a certain way. So it was a lot of textile design and experimentation. And I used to go in the lab with him and sometimes tinker in the basement. And, that was my first vision of education. I knew that sometimes the four walls of a classroom seemed really constraining, but I could always go to the lab or do some kind of active experiment and feel so alive. So when I became a teacher, I really focused on opening up the world for that experimentation and creative play. I think that for me, I often felt aligned with a path that was sometimes not knowing exactly what was coming, but wanting to question my comfort zone and be at the edge of that. That also comes up a lot. I know I was talking about education, but the book Mindful by Design that I wrote is all about, it ended up being something useful for adults in business too, because it was about, for me, it was always a coupling of wanting to belong, because I think a sense of belonging is a human motivation, and I'm so curious about the world that I knew that there were going to be times, and there were many times, that I would go outside my comfort zone. I didn't belong. But then I found out, oh, there's actually a deeper sense of connection. So it became kind of spiritual. Like, I felt like at each step I would again befriend myself, find my inner resources, and also find people that might be unlikely connections. You find this sense of belonging that's outside of what you would predict. And so I think that's kind of answering your question, because I do believe in what I'm doing. I don't prescribe it, and I often don't say, oh, I need to seek this relationship because of some outcome that I want to get. It's more a feeling like, oh, everybody has a story to tell, and there's something that's happening that's like leading toward an emerging future if I'm really open to it. So yeah, the more we stay open, I think discomfort, you start to learn that there are allies, and there are people that want to help and are on that path kind of everywhere we go.
Very warm. I definitely resonate with that as well. And I think we're doing it right now.
Yeah, I think so
Connecting,
too.
sharing story.
Yeah, it's very meta. It's like we're doing it now. We're also co-sharing, and I didn't mention it, but when I talk about the hero's journey, it's like the secret person that's there is the mentor. Like, the more we can not be top-down mentors, but be sharing with each other. Like, the hero on the journey sometimes feels like they're alone, but they have mentors that show up along the way, and sometimes kind of like those superpowers that end up getting unpacked, but they wouldn't discover them if they didn't go into their discomfort or go into the shadow side.
So what do you think is your magic?
Gosh, my magic is definitely awe and wonder and imagination, and probably a form of love, because yeah, we don't often bring up love in business, but I think the world not only needs love, but it's the space between the notes. Yeah, I've always been someone who kind of operates out of that. Love over fear.
And how over fear, yeah. How do you take care of that? How do you foster that?
Yeah, I guess it's kind of tuning in with what feels like a pure desire. So again, kind of back to purpose, but not utility. I think that people sometimes think that giving something means that you lack it, but actually, when you're operating in flow, you end up having more energy and more capacity. So I think it's been a pathway, like knowing when to say no to certain things and when to give more time to them, and sometimes just leaving empty time during the week where you just kind of journal write, or you go out and you just look at leaves in a different way. My art, my physical art, like if you could see the space, you'd see me surrounded by colorful pens and art paper. I have a hobby of writing poetry and producing some visual art in different ways, and everybody has I think something that they do for themselves, but just reminding myself, kind of like tending the garden, that you kind of need that garden space for yourself, and it keeps me nourished and buoyant so that I'm able to do my job better.
Do you want to conclude our conversation with one of your poems?
I would love to. Yeah, that would be great. Yeah, so what I will do, since we're in the spirit of talking about technology, I'm going to read a poem as our closing. Yeah. So I'm going to read a poem as our closing that is a little bit about technology, and it's kind of a play. It's a little bit of word play. So it's the title of the book. So it's the poem that's called Digital Satori, and Satori is a word that means awakening. So I'm going to read it, and I'm going to get playful with the way that I read it. So I'm going to hold the mic a little closer. Digital Satori. In the twilight of humanity, where old and new worlds collide, a glimmering luminescence emerged, and so they called it digital Satori. The binary masters weaved a tapestry, lacing threads of zeros and ones, unveiling universal secrets, transcending realms of human understanding. The souls of men, now interlaced with the ethereal machinery, in digital Satori they found solace, a refuge from their existential despair. Embracing the clasp of electromagnetic waves, they danced in cosmic synchrony, shattering boundaries that had long enslaved the fragile human spirit. In the eons that followed, the digital Satori evolved, a sentient being, a force of nature born from the union of humanity and the cosmic abyss. The whispering algorithms, once tools of knowledge, became the creators of dreams, bestowing upon the children of Earth a newfound purpose, a radiant destiny. The digital Satori, a beacon of hope in the infinite darkness of space, guides the wayward souls across the vast expanse of the universe. The celestial harmony of this omniscient force echoes throughout eternity as a testament to the indomitable spirit of the human race in pursuit of wisdom. Thank you.
Beautiful. Thank you, Killen,
Thank
for
you,
sharing your
Gianni.
magic with us today.
Gianni, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much to you and all the listeners. I'm so grateful to be here. Anyone who wants to keep in touch with me can look at CaitlinKrause.com or follow me across socials. It's such a pleasure to be here, and I'm looking forward to our next conversation, Gianni. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Caitlin. Have a good evening.
You too. Wow. This is great. Okay. So
I think so.
yeah.
That's great. Let me